Call this meeting to order. It's the Sioux Falls City Council informational meeting. This is April 2nd, 2013. Welcome all of you at Carnegie Town Hall. Those of you watching live on CityLink and SiouxFalls.org, glad that you're here this afternoon. We have lots of things to get done today, so we'll get started right away, beginning with City Council open discussion. Any items from council members? Councilor Staggers? Pulling out his billfold. I love it. Okay, let's do it.
The first one is in regard to smoking in the parks. In the past, the City Council has voted to not have smoking in public buildings. And part of the rationale for that is because we as the City Council oversee these buildings and we're responsible for the buildings. I guess likewise, I would say the city parks are our responsibility. We oversee the city parks. However, we now have a government agency imposing no smoking in the parks. I guess I'm a little concerned about the appropriateness of them doing that. This is the responsibility of the City Council. So that's a big concern that I have. And then also, a second concern I have is in regard to the blocking of the city internet to certain sites. Now, the administration is perfectly within its authority to block the internet for the administration, for the executive branch. However, I'm concerned about blocking it for the City Council. There are a couple of websites that are being blocked. So,
how? I'm confused. What do you mean? Can you, on what computer are you talking about, Councilor Staggers?
well, if you get on the city internet, those are blocked.
City internet.
The website, I should say. Okay. Our email.
I haven't run into that.
Dean, can you maybe explain that a little
someone help?
more?
I have run into that also, Councilor Staggers, and I was trying to do some people were talking some research onto information, and I was unable to obtain it for that reason. The specific website, I can't remember. I don't know if it was an MSN website or what, but it was a little offsetting.
Yeah, there are two websites I'm aware of.
I would, if I could comment on
ahead.
that. I just did that here too, and there are certain sites that are blocked, as that happens at my workplace also. MSN, Hotmail, different things like that, so that employees are not using their time in ways that they shouldn't be using it, and those are probably rightfully so not available to employees, and we're employees at that point when we're using the website. And
no, we're not employees
email
of the administration. No, we're not.
Well, we shouldn't be. If we want to use Hotmail, we should be doing it on our own anyway. That kind of thing.
If I want to go to a certain blog to find out what they're saying about the city, I don't want it blocked. I want to be able to do it.
From the city, the city's website, they probably don't need. People should not be looking at blogs on the city's time anyway, and so they probably have blocked all those for city people. Therefore, you can go look at those on your own time and from a different website.
Okay, hang on. Councilor Entman.
You know, if this is the case, Councilor, I would suggest that we just clarify that with Suquat and Beckett and find out what the city policy is on that before we continue to speculate.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm concerned because, number one, I haven't run into that problem in any way, shape, or form, and so I need to know more about it. Councilor Staggers, if we could have a conversation about it later, and then leadership will take it to the
main
administration.
thing, once again, we are not city employees. We are elected officials, and we should have access to practically anything. And if the administration wants to prevent city employees, that's perfectly fine, but they shouldn't include us.
Okay. Good. Other items for open discussion, Councilor Staggers?
One final thing is, I've asked in the past about a city health card, and nobody seems to know anything about it. But I did hear an advertisement on the radio just a few days ago by this company saying, and also you can use your city health card. And so I'm still trying to find out what the city health card is.
And we've had staff look into that, and he also could not find that. I just wonder if it's City of Sioux Falls or it's City Bank. And so we have had staff look into it and haven't discovered it to be a city health card. So,
Yeah, well, I'll keep looking.
okay.
Again, I think we'll just push this on to Jill and Director and see if we can get some input.
We will do that. Good. Other items for open discussion this afternoon. Councilor Jameson.
Just going to make the body aware that there's an audit committee meeting Thursday at 4 o'clock in this room if you're interested. We've got, I think, several reports to review, but Thursday at 4.
Great. Thank you. Open discussion items. Okay, we're going to move on then. Oh, and I do have one, sorry. Work session reminder. We do have a work session a week from tomorrow, April 10th, 4 o'clock. And tomorrow is your deadline. If you have items you would like our budget analyst to look at for you in terms of CIP surplus, get that to Dave either today or tomorrow. And so 4 o'clock next Wednesday. All right, then we'll move into our presentations. We'll begin with the Overlook Cafe Management Agreement. Dave Fisher, Assistant Director of Parks and Recreation. Welcome, Dave. And make sure you turn the buttons on for your microphones, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council. Dave Fisher, Parks and Recreation. Appreciate the time to be able to share with you some of the information regarding the management agreement that we would like to enter into with Micromanagement LLC for management of the Overlook Cafe. First, a little bit of background on the cafe. The cafe opened for the first time in 2004. We've had 3 different vendors in 8.5 years. The last day of operation was October 20th, 2012. At the direction of the Parks and Recreation Board, we initiated the following process. We formed a vendor selection team. We selected a consultant to assist us with identifying what some of the limiting factors might be to securing a viable vendor for the cafe. We developed a request for proposals, and we conducted interviews. The vendor selection team consisted of Don Kearney, myself, and Lauren Beard from Parks and Recreation, Mike Crane and Sandra Pay from the Parks and Recreation Board, Jim Entenman from the City Council, Scott Rust from the City Finance staff, and Terry Schmidt from the CVB, which manages the Falls Park Visitor Center. Special thanks at this point to our consultant, Paul Van Bakkeren from the Minerva Group, who volunteered his time to help in this process. His experience and expertise along the way were invaluable. The goals in the process were to determine if the cafe could be successful without major upgrades to the building or equipment, to identify what might be considered limiting factors to the success of the cafe, of which we identified acoustics, availability of beer and wine, and also the hours of operation in the winter and summer. With regard to acoustics, we're dealing with 2 vendors, local vendors, to come up with proposals to tell us how they might be able to deal with improving the acoustics within the building. In the past, the beer and wine availability was restricted to private groups, and the consultant and the selection team both recommended that under the right circumstances, we'd be able to expand this provision. Hours of operation in the winter, the challenge was that in the past, we've required the vendor to be open on a daily basis. And obviously, particularly after the Winter Wonderland show, the attendance to the park dwindles, and it makes it hard to make the business go. In the summer, the challenge has been needing to close early and clear the east side of the park out for the sound and light show due to the federal regulations associated with operation of the laser used in the show. We discussed this with the Sound and Light Show board to see if the show could be altered so that we wouldn't have to shut down the east side of the park. We found out that there had been conversations already among their board about the show having run its course, and that after 13 years, ultimately the board consensus was to sunset the show. The Parks and Recreation Board has asked staff to look for an alternative to the show, which we fully intend to do. At this point, however, it allows for expansion of the hours at the cafe. The other goals included developing a request for proposals, interviewing candidates, and ultimately reopening the cafe by early May. Now, just to share a couple agreements, or a couple of bullets from the agreement with you, we're proposing a 5-year agreement that would expire January 31st, 2018. The city would receive 10% of the gross receipts. The scope of the agreement is to operate a professionally run, family-oriented food service, along with private rentals and catering events. The city pays utilities. The intent of the beer and wine use is for private rentals and to complement the patron's dining experience. Furthermore, alcohol may not be the focus of advertising or specials such as bucket night or 2-for-1 promotions. There are several reports that are required within the agreement to assist staff and the Parks and Recreation Board with our oversight responsibilities, including an annual budget, an operational plan, quarterly financial statements, an annual financial report, a certified audit upon request of the City of Sioux Falls, and a marketing plan. In summary, we feel that the process implemented by the Parks and Recreation Board was thorough, that we have addressed or will be addressing the limiting factors identified through the process. The vendor that has been selected already has experience at the cafe, and that she ran it during the course of Winter Wonderland. I would also like to report that the agreement was unanimously recommended for approval by the Parks and Recreation Board on March 26, 2013, and our ultimate plan is to place this item on the council agenda for action on April 9th. At this time, I'd like to introduce Rhonda Milstead, owner of Micromanagement, to make a few comments while we also view Rhonda's proposed menu for startup. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Rhonda.
I don't have to tell all of you what a gem we have in our park system. It's fantastic. And when you turned that hydroelectric plant into a cafe, it's a beautiful building, and I think it has a lot of potential. I did operate it over Winter Wonderland on the weekends and had a fabulous time with it. Just meeting and greeting people and providing them quality food, learning the building, and what it did was assure me that that is really what I want to do. I think that there's a lot of potential there to be an integral part of the community as far as just participating in community events, even cooperating with the events that are out there already. I think that the cafe could serve as a venue to complement the events that are out there, such as the Mayor's Picnic, Festival of Cultures, even partnering with agencies in the community like the Historical Society. That is a historical place. And I think we can do a lot in educating adults and children down there, and not just having a cafe, but have it be something that really matters and really means something. And even partnering with a lot of local vendors. You take the wineries, you take the farmers market. There's just potential there to even showcase our community's ingenuity and entrepreneurial spirit. And I think just people are going to come back to the cafe. They're going to want to come back just because of the good conversation that we will engage with them. I want the employees down there to be service-oriented. Excellent service is important. Even training as far as how to handle visitors and visit with them. Make people feel like guests and not customers. And the menu was set up in such a way that it's interesting, but it's also affordable. And that's very important to me because I want it to touch everybody's lives that wants to be part of that. The hours of operation that we're looking at, I planned on April 15th to October 1st being open from 10 to 10. In the winter months, I don't want to close down. I think that it needs to be there and that people can see it. But if we're open over the lunch hours on the weekdays, and then really focus on special events down there in terms of educating and participating and partnering with the rest of the community, I think it'd be a fabulous place. And I'm very excited about it. There's nothing I'm not excited about in this. I think it's going to be a fantastic opportunity, and I appreciate that you've given me that.
Great, thank you. Questions from council for either Dave or for Rhonda? Councilor Rolfing.
A couple of questions. First of all, the audit situation, does that include our internal city auditor being able to do an audit down there?
Yeah, we would have access to all records.
Okay. And then for you, I've forgotten your name already. Rhonda, right. I'm no good with names, as you'll find out. Rhonda, I noticed the menu is, you're still not able to prepare items basically on site. And that's been kind of one of the problems down there. Tell me how you are going to get around that this time with the menu that you've got.
There isn't anything on that menu that we can't prepare on site. Mike Denny actually looked at the menu and approved it. Everything that's on that menu is done in an oven, in a microwave, in a crock pot. Some of it's pre-prepared, you know, you might have to buy meats that are cooked, but other than that, there's nothing that can't be done in the
No,
cafe.
I understand that, but you're not preparing a steak there. You're not preparing a regular meal, let's put it that way. And that has been kind of the downfall, it seems like, down there. Because it would be a really nice place to go and sit out on that deck and have a nice dinner, that kind of thing, a steak or a pork chop or you know, some spaghetti and, you know, or something Italian or whatever. How are you planning on getting around that?
Just in the experience over Winter Wonderland, people were happy with a sandwich and a bowl of soup. They were happy with a cup of hot chocolate and a dessert.
Okay.
And so I think, I mean, it's not a formal menu by any means. It's an
Right.
informal menu, and it's really cause for relaxing. I think you'll
Okay.
see people sitting out there on the deck enjoying a sandwich and even a glass of beer or a glass of wine. I think that's going to draw them. So I think it'll be just fine.
Well, I sure hope it is. I think that's, I wish you well. I really do, because I'd love to see that place taken off and be a destination for people to go and have a nice meal and sit out there and watch the falls and be part of Sioux Falls. So good luck. Good
It is
luck.
a destination, and there are plenty of places in this town to have a great steak.
Yep.
And I don't want to compete with that at all. I just want this to be something different and something very special that's a community place.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Jameson.
Dave, will she be allowed to have a grill outside if she were to grill out hamburgers or hot dogs or grill anything? Could she have a grill?
You know, that's a good question, and I don't know the answer to, but I'll find out.
I think that'd be a great benefit if it could. You know, I guess I don't know the rules, but
Yeah,
okay. And then
I'll find that out and get it to you.
okay, I think it'd just be helpful for the success of the
Sure.
place. And then Rhonda, a question for you. I can't read the menu, but what kind of ice cream will you have? Just
What kind would you like?
chocolate.
Oh, definitely chocolate.
All right.
We had chocolate, we had moose tracks, we had, you could have a dozen different kinds of ice creams in there.
All right.
You're okay with that? Okay. Councilor Antoman.
You know, I do need to commend Dave and Don and Lauren, the whole park staff, and for those that were on the advisory selection team too. We did have, actually Rhonda, she did come up before the group, and she went through a Q&A session for about an hour and a half, I think it was, and we're really excited about it. You know, she fits in well, as she proved with Winter Wonderland, and she's very excited about making the place a success. So we actually were very pleased. All the parties that were really involved were part of the process, and we want to make sure this is going to be a great facility for the city of Sioux Falls. So I'd like to thank the whole team, and Rhonda, go get them.
Good. Thank you. Councilor Staggers.
Dave, you mentioned something about a consultant.
Right.
Was it from Minerva's, or is that who
Right.
you're referring to? Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions? All right. April 15th, huh? Is that what did you say you're opening April 15th?
That would be in the future.
Oh, okay.
This year I'm hoping to be open by May 10th.
May 10th. All right. Lunch on May 10th. Awesome. Thank you. All right. And it will be, as a reminder to council, it'll be an action item on our agenda on April 9th. All right. Let's move on in our agenda. Snowgate analysis by Galen Huber. Street Fleet Manager, Tracy Turbeck, Finance Director, Mark Cotter, Director of Public Works. Come on down.
All right.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Council Chair Erpenbach and City Council members. I'm Mark Cotter, the Director of Public Works. Today, Mayor Mike Uther, the Finance Department and Public Works will share with you the summary of our findings based on the Snowgate test analysis. We've tested Snowgates now for 3 winter seasons. We've utilized GPS technology to capture in-field operational data. The test analysis has included streets that reflect all types of neighborhood streets in Sioux Falls, from inner core city streets to new development streets. Private contractors of Sioux Falls also make up 40% of our snow removal forces when we ultimately declare a snow alert and go into the neighborhoods and plow them open. The private contractors have been included in the snow gate analysis for the past 2 years and have also been outfitted with this GPS technology so we can also capture their operational data. We've organized the presentation today in 4 areas: the operational analysis, opportunities and risks, financial considerations, and the mayor's recommendation. So let's get started. Galen Huber, our street fleet manager, will take you through the operational analysis. Galen?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council. Galen Huber, Street Fleet Manager for Public Works. As Mark mentioned, for the last 3 winters, we've been tasked with testing snow gates throughout the city of Sioux Falls, and my team has performed as good as I knew they would. And today what I'm going to do is give you a summary of those findings as far as operational analysis goes. First of all, let's go back and take a look and see what a typical winter is in Sioux Falls. A typical winter in Sioux Falls averages 43 inches. The National Weather Service is the recorder of data as far as weather goes within Sioux Falls, and that number comes straight from them. So the numbers that you see here all reflect from the National Weather Service. So we receive 43 inches on the average. During that 43 inches, we will get normally right around 5 snow alerts, and the budget for the 2013 snow removal budget is $7.2 million, and that reflects very closely to what it costs us to remove snow on any given year. The next thing that we like to talk about is snow alerts. What is a snow alert? A snow alert is declared when we get a certain amount of snow within the city of Sioux Falls that we determine that it's important for us to go in and plow every residential street. There's no black and white number to what that amount is. We use 2 inches as our benchmark to start taking a look at calling a snow alert. But we could get 2 inches of really wet snow and call a snow alert at 2 inches, or get 3 inches of really dry snow and still not call a snow alert. Because we will take a look at every event separately to determine when that snow alert is actually called. So there's really no true black and white number when we call a snow alert. When we do call a snow alert, we go in, and that is when we will take the snow gates out. That's the only time we take them out, is when we call a snow alert. And when we do that, normally what it takes us without the snow gates, we've been running about 24 to 30 hours to clear the streets. We use 120 pieces of equipment at every 12-hour shift that gets repeated throughout the 24-hour period. And we clear 3,000 lane miles of street within the city of Sioux Falls within that 24 to 30 hours. And again, this is when we go in and clean every residential street within the city of Sioux Falls. This is a table that basically shows what we have seen over the last 3 years while we've been testing the snow gates. For our winter season, we use October through April because we do get snow in October and we do get snow in April. And so we've gone through and listed the number of snow alerts that we had for each of the years, the days of precipitation that we've had for each of these years, and then the snow amounts for each of these years. Over the past 3 years, we have essentially sampled 20% of the city streets within the city of Sioux Falls with snow gates. We tried to get a rounded sample, and as you can see, we tried to get into areas where we thought we'd have different configurations, different challenges that we would see, and I think we did a good job of selecting areas to test those gates. What did we consider when we started the Snowgate program and as we've continued over the last 3 winters? We've looked at the amount of snow per event, the type of snow, the total snow accumulations throughout the year, the street characteristics, driveway width and spacing, the type of the equipment, and the operator experience. In my last 2 slides, I'm going to go through and actually explain these in more detail. I just wanted to let you know what we were considering when we were going out and taking a look at this. One of the other factors that we considered was our private contractors. Our private contractors make up of over 40% of our snow removal equipment on the streets. They're a vital part of our snow removal, and they get the success like we do when we do a good job. But part of the things that we do with private contractors is we take a look at their shift coordination, because normally we are on shift way before they are called in. The communications between private contractors and the City of Sioux Falls, their fueling, and the repair and maintenance that private contractors have. One of the other things that we've took a look at is snow gates. Hinky and Ironics are the two big players in the snow gate market in the United States, and we've tested both of these pieces of equipment. And each of them has a little bit different engineered design to them. If you take a look at the Hinky snow gate, you can see that it is actually mounted inside the gutter guard that you have there, the yellow piece of metal that you see that goes up and down with arrows pointed at, whereas the Ironics is mounted on the outside of the blade. Each of them believe that they have a certain advantage to having them mounted like that, and we've certainly seen a difference between the two of them because of the way they were mounted onto the blade. The other thing that we've seen is the vertical height and the horizontal distance that we've seen on the snow gates. The Hinky can travel a lot closer to the curb because it has a more upright positioning when the gate is open. The Ironics comes out because of the wing that it has behind it. It has to come out at a slant, and it doesn't allow us to get as close to the curb as we want because of how that rides when that gate is shut. And also when we lift that gate up, any obstacle that we may have out there, like a fire hydrant, a mailbox, a phone pedestal, or even tree branches can come into play on some of these. This is just showing you a little bit about the efficiency between the two. If you take a look at the inside of the Hinky Gate, you can see that it closes tight against the gutter guard. And I wish I would have taken a better picture of the Ironics. I should have took it from behind. But there's actually a 4-inch gap when that's mounted on the outside, and that wing that comes back around the moldboard, there's actually a 4-inch gap there. And when we shut that gate, there's 4 inches of snow coming through that opening in there, and it makes it for not a very efficient method of keeping snow out of, reducing the amount of snow in a driveway or in an intersection. So we've certainly seen some advantages to the snow gates. What did we learn from snow gates? They're effective at reducing snow in driveways and intersections. They do that. They won't eliminate it, but they do reduce the amount of snow that goes into a driveway and into an intersection. They're most effective if less than 6 inches of snowfall. This last snowstorm that we had on February 22nd was a good example of that. I was dealing with about 6 inches on the west side, and I was dealing with right around 7 inches on the east side of Sioux Falls. The east side of Sioux Falls, when we were plowing with our snow gates, we were seeing a tremendous amount of snow coming around the gates, around the moldboard on both sides, both the center and the curb, when the gate was shut, and also over the top of the moldboard. So there is certainly a certain limit to their effectiveness with snow per event. It takes more time with wet, heavy snow. The wet snow packs in against the moldboard when we shut the gate. When we open it up, it doesn't necessarily leave. It stays there. And so we have a harder time, and plus there's more weight. It takes a little bit longer for us to push that material along just because there's so much more weight there. Cul-de-sacs and wide driveways are challenging for us. Cul-de-sacs are challenging before snow gates because what we end up having to do is go into the cul-de-sac and pull the majority of that snow out onto the street and feather it along the curb. When we try to do that with a snow gate attached on, we end up pushing a lot of snow twice because it comes around the blade. And so we're having to go back in and make several trips to pull that out rather than doing it all in one motion like we've done in the past. Wide driveways are finding out that a lot of houses now are building 3-car garages. And these 3-car garages have maybe 3 car widths going out onto the street. The lots aren't necessarily getting any larger to accommodate them, so those three-car garages are getting closer and closer together. We've actually had this year some instances where we had to keep the gate shut through 2 driveways because there's nowhere to open up the gate because there's only 6 inches between the 2 driveways. And so we couldn't open it up and put it in the driveway, so we took it all the way through. And you can imagine how much snow came around that gate while it was going through 2 driveways. Streets begin to narrow as snow accumulates throughout the winter. I'll give you a good example. The first year that we had this, we had snow that started in the fall or in November, and it stayed pretty much all winter long. We had 46 inches of snow. This year we've had 20 inches of snow, and it's basically been melting for us as it's been falling. When we have typical snows, where the snow stays and accumulates throughout the entire winter, as we keep on pushing against that existing snow, we have a harder and harder time to try and keep it at the curb, and it tends to fall back down into the street, which causes the narrowing effect for us. We just can't get enough momentum. The art of pushing snow is to get some momentum to roll that into the parking strip. We can't get enough momentum to roll it over that first 20, 25 inches that's there. And so it sets and then falls back down into the street. So we do get a narrowing of the streets out there. We believe that 6-wheel drive motor graders are key to this. They have the ability to pull all 6 wheels, and when we have heavy wet snow and we put the gate down, we want to make sure that the front end isn't pulled around and we drive into the curb or up onto the grass. We want to make sure that we're going straight down the road. And so the ability of those front wheels to also drive for us and pull. And a lot of times when you see the heavy wet snow, and you'll see my operators actually have their front wheels cantered. They're pushing against that wet snow, and they're keeping them going straight down the curb line. Operator effectiveness improves with experience. My operators that started out 3 years ago, I've switched them around with different snow gates. I switched them around in different areas, and they certainly feel a lot more comfortable this year than they did that very first year when we were doing it. There's going to be there's a learning curve to running these things, and one of the biggest things that my experienced operators told me, they told me was, Galen, it's hard to keep an eye looking down the front because not everybody pulls their car off of the street. We have to look for cars that we have to drive around those. The police and parking do a nice job of ticketing, but they don't necessarily get towed in Zone 3 right away. So we end up having to go around. So we have to watch out for traffic in front of us. We also are trying to keep that blade as close as we can to the curb, so that we are pushing the snow as far as we can and keep the streets from being narrowed any sooner than they have to be. And then we're trying to figure out where the driveway is, because you don't necessarily know if there's a 3-car garage there, if there's 3 car widths coming out, or if there's only 1.5 coming out. So they're guessing at where that is. And in the process of doing that, they're looking up at the driveway or up at the garage trying to figure that out. So they're looking at 4 different things and trying to run a motor grader and open and shut the gate. And they said that's probably the hardest thing that they've had to deal with trying to do this, the test over the last year, because we've gotten into these types of areas. It requires teamwork with the private contractors. Again, we start out before the private contractors are called in. We call them in after we declare the snow alert. So we may call them in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We always shift at noon and at midnight. So we have to work with contractors. They want to go 12-hour shifts, so they're going 3 to 3 or 5 to 5. We're always on 12 to 12. So it takes coordination with us to work with their shifting. They bring a maintenance equipment and a fuel truck out to the street. Their 2 pairs are being fueled and maintained right on the street. Their cutting edges get removed right on the street. We go into our shop and have our fleet go through and take care of that and fuel up at that time. Our cutting edges usually last a 12-hour shift, and we don't necessarily have to come in between shifts to do cutting edges or to fuel up. And communications is another thing. When we communicate with the private contractors, we have one phone number we call, and they contact their operators through their system, through their radio system. We don't talk to them on our radio system. And so there's communication logistics that we work out with the private contractors. And certainly the Hinky Gates work better than the Ironics do. They will allow us to go closer to the curb, and they minimize the amount of snow that gets around the blades. So in the finding between these two, the Hinky Gate certainly works better. Mark's going to talk about opportunities and risks.
Thank you, Galen. All right, let me take you through what we've identified as the opportunities with snow gates and also the balance of that, which is the risks. All right, first, the opportunities. Snow gates, as Galen said, do reduce the amount of snow in driveways. They also reduce the amount of snow as we plow through an intersection. What we've done historically is when we take two motor graders through an intersection, the outside motor grader actually leaves a windrow of snow that either stays back and tucks around the corner, or a trailing sander takes care of that windrow so the team can actually move through. One of the opportunities that comes with snow gates is as they go through an intersection, they can drop the snow gate, carry that through, and then discharge the snow when they get to the lagging side of the intersection. And then we did have, after that first year, 2010, 2011, we would capture as a normal year for snow in Sioux Falls. We also conducted a public meeting. It was very well attended and got substantial public feedback, positive public feedback. And so those are the opportunities that we see with snow gates. Now for the risks. And Galen's touched on this as well, but with snow gates, as we've extrapolated the GPS information, that without snow gates today in a typical snowfall of 3 to 5 inches, we'll normally cover the city's streets in about 24 to 30 hours. With snow gates, our estimates are 26 to 34 hours. So it's about a 2 to 4 hour increase in time to plow all 73 square miles of the city out. We also have some potential for some additional delays. Snow gates are a mechanical device. They've got pins, they have hydraulic needs, they also have cylinders, so they can break, and so that's one of the factors that we'd be watching. And then Galen mentioned just the private contractor logistics. Today when we go into respective zones, there's 2 city blades that go in as a team, and essentially the contractors, they will go in 2 contractor blades. We do operate independently. We've each got our assigned areas, but once the expectation is set, they start plowing their streets curb to curb, and we do as well. One of the things that we've seen and talked through with the contractors is we think that the fit would be better with a city blade at the curb. Like Galen said, with these 6-wheel drive machines, they have the weight, they have the horsepower, and then a private contractor would run the center line. And so those logistics, along with shifting, fueling, and maintenance, things that Galen mentioned as well, that can be worked through. All right, narrowing of streets. One of the items we talked about the first year in some of the pictures that we shown were there were some areas where some school zones that started to get concerned about as the snow accumulations increase, that the narrowing of streets begins to happen because you're just not rolling that snow as fast as normal, and so you start to, at each snow event, narrow up the streets a certain amount. And so we always want to make sure that we meet and exceed the public's expectations and deliver safe, drivable streets. And so in some of those areas, snow pickup may be needed to provide safe vehicle access. I know in some areas they've talked about that if you get a real narrow area, you may have to eliminate parking on one side of the street so you can still maintain that safe, drivable street. We didn't reach that point in 2010, 2011, but we got very close to that point. We also expect there's increased requests for plowbacks, and essentially what that is that if you can envision a street that's plowed curb to curb, and if the wind comes up and there's some slight finger drifting that occurs on one side of the street, normally cars are either parked there so it doesn't affect the drivable street. When the street's narrow, those finger drifts can actually start to come into our main drive access, and so we would expect that there will be some request for plowbacks to make sure that those finger drifts are properly addressed. Reduced line of sight at intersections and driveways. One of the areas when you concentrate the discharge of snow in a certain area, you can actually create a line of sight issue. And so one of the examples when we're plowing through an intersection and dropping the gate, when we get to the lagging side of the intersection and then open up to discharge that snow, that depositing of that snow can build up over time and create a line of sight issue at those intersections. Block stormwater inlets during the spring melt. That was another item that we experienced. Again, as the streets narrow, you'll start to get 3, 4, 6 feet of snow in front of those storm intakes. And with melting days like today, if we had our normal accumulation that we would have and we'd start to see that snow melt, until that meltwater can actually get to the snow intakes, you'll start to see a lot of ponding of water at intersections. And consequently driveway accesses. And so toward the end of that 2010-2011 season, that was some of the feedback that we started to get was that we need to make sure that this water drains. So that would be something that we'd need to address. And then as you start to narrow a street, that also means additional shoveling for opening up your hydrants and your mailboxes. Okay, so as you manage the opportunities and risks, we understand and believe that we need to have some flexibility to limit the use of snow gates in certain circumstances. As Galen said, really once we go over that 6-inch snowfall amount, not only does the snow, it's too much snow for the gate to trap and begins to migrate around the front of the gate and discharge into the driveways, but it also starts to roll over the top of the mow board. And those safe black streets that you normally see, you start to see that there's about an inch of snow that gets left behind. And so that was an instance where we believe that once we hit those thresholds of snowfall to limit the use of snow gates, and again that would be on a per event basis. And then greater snow accumulation at the curb, as you can see, as those streets get narrow, starts to tighten up that area of parking and the drive-through, and we want to always make sure that we deliver safe, drivable streets, not only for people's daily commutes, but also for emergency access. So that's a summary of the risks and opportunities, and I will turn it over to Tracy Turback.
Good afternoon. Tracy Turback with the Finance Office. As Mark mentioned in his opening remarks, we've just completed our 3rd winter of testing snow gates. And in that first season, those of us that have been following this or close to this issue will recall that we did have a more typical, what we think of as a normal winter. And Galen's chart reflected that. We did have 6 snow alerts that first winter. And we were testing snow gates in 2 neighborhoods that first season. The number of test areas was increased the second year to 3 neighborhoods, and then this most recent winter it was expanded to 6 test areas. Now the past 2 winters have been unusually mild. I think we can all agree on that. We haven't seen typical South Dakota winters the past two seasons. So even though the number of snow gate test areas was increased, because the past 2 winters have been so mild, they've not really been ideal winters to gather test data that we can use to analyze the potential budgetary impacts. So certainly more snow and more frequent snowstorms would have been beneficial over the past couple of years, although I don't think anybody has really complained. I was one of maybe the few people, maybe a couple others in the room, that were actually wishing for snow this last winter, but it's something I don't ordinarily do. If we had more test data, more snowstorms, we certainly would have had more data to analyze, and we could be more confident in our projections of what those future budgetary impacts of implementing snow gates citywide might be. So from a perspective of making projections, more snow, these past 2 winters certainly would have been welcome. In just a minute, I will share with you some estimates of the budgetary impacts of implementing snow gates citywide, but I do think it's important for all of us to keep in mind that those projections and conclusions that we've come to are based on data that is really quite limited for the reasons I just mentioned. So the actual costs that that we would see or would expect to see if the city were to implement Snowgate citywide most certainly would vary to some degree from the projections that we'll provide, partly due because of the winter conditions and that change from year to year, as well as all of the other variables that and things that were considered that Galen mentioned in his segment of the presentation. When we set to the task of analyzing the budgetary impacts that we could expect if Snowgates were utilized citywide, we tried to start with a blank slate. We went back to the start of the testing and reevaluated all of the data from all 3 winters. And in doing so, I hope we attempted to use the most comprehensive approach that we could so that we could identify all the areas of cost and quantify them to the best of our abilities and the best that the data would allow. The analysis, the financial part of the analysis was very much a collaborative effort between the finance team, Public Works, and the street department teams. We spent a lot of quality time together talking about Snowgates, talking about the snow removal program, and a lot of that time was involved the finance team asking questions about snow removal and how the process works and how the operations work, to the point where we felt like we had a pretty good understanding, at least as it relates to the use of Snowgates, how the use of Snowgates might impact that snow removal program. For the purposes of analyzing those costs and then presenting them to you and to the public, we grouped the costs into three areas. The first area being the plowing costs, which are really comprised of the way I look at it, 2 components. The first components are those costs that are associated with plowing that are quite variable in nature. Those things like fuel that operates the graders, the city labor and city leased equipment that we utilize, as well as the contracted labor and equipment. The more snow we get, the more storms we have, obviously the more we spend in those areas, and the more the use of Snowgates would impact those costs. Those variable type of costs were analyzed on a per mile basis using the GPS data that Mark mentioned, that were gathered by those onboard electronic units in each of the motor graders. In addition to those more variable costs, the plowing costs also include a second component of costs that are less variable. That would be the time and expense it takes in the fall to install the Snowgates on the motor graders, to repair and maintain the Snowgates throughout the winter season, and then to remove them in the spring, as well as the cost to replace the Snowgates on a 5-year basis. They're expected to have a 5-year useful life, and so in our analysis, we've amortized those costs out over that 5-year time frame. So all of those costs that I've just been talking about comprise the plowing portion of the cost. The second item is the initial cost of the Snowgate equipment itself. It's pretty straightforward. We know pretty confidently how many Snowgates we need, and we know pretty well what each unit is going to cost based on purchases that we've made. So that was really a pretty basic analysis, fairly simple math. Third component of snow pickup cost, and you see a photograph of that on the slide. As Mark, it relates to the issue that Mark mentioned with the narrowing of the streets. As snow accumulates in the street and that street narrows, and that does happen more readily with the use of Snowgates, so we will expect that we would need to be picking up snow and removing snow from certain areas of the community during some winters. Now, when it came to analyzing the cost associated with snow pickup, it was much more difficult than analyzing the other costs because the data was even more limited. In fact, we had very little data to work from at all in that area. The last 2 winters, the second and third winter of our test winters, we incurred no cost to pick up snow because of the nature of the winters we had, relatively little snow. This past winter in particular, when we did get snow, it would quite often melt it off before the next snowstorm, and so we didn't see the kinds of accumulations. Now, the first year was really provided the only data we had to go on Snow was picked up in one school zone that happened to be in one of those 2 test areas that first year. And so we did factor that in, but because of the very limited data relative to the snow pickup cost, this is really the area that I'm least confident in giving you any sort of a firm projection on what those costs might be. However, I do expect that it could be, in certain winters, quite a significant cost. So, based on the data that we gathered over all 3 test winters, we had 10 snow alerts over that 3-year time frame or 3-season time frame. The plowing costs associated with fuel consumption, we've estimated that the fuel consumption for plowing operations would increase anywhere from 0% to as much as 13%. As has been discussed already, the lighter, fluffier snow we would expect to have very minimal, if any, impact to the amount of fuel that is consumed. And likewise, those lighter snowfalls that occur when there isn't any existing snow on the ground would also have a minimal impact, if any, on the amount of fuel consumed. The data did indicate that with the wetter, heavier snows and the larger snowstorms of 6 inches or perhaps more, the impact on the fuel consumption would be more significant. Now, when we look at it overall through the 3 winters that were tested, the expected impact of fuel costs for plowing with snow gates in a typical winter, we would expect to see an increase of about 13%. In winters that we've seen the past 2 seasons, we would expect to really have no impact whatsoever. And that's part of the variability of the information that we've been able to gather. The other aspect on the plowing cost that was analyzed very closely was the operational time that it takes, the impact on that time. And that operational time refers to the amount of time that it takes or that is required to clear the city streets when a snow alert is called. And we've estimated that the operational time would increase between 6 and 13% as a result of implementing snow gates citywide. So, of course, that increased operational time results in increased costs for city labor and city leased equipment, as well as the contracted services that both Mark and Galen talked about. So we took those estimated impacts and translated that into the dollar amount of budgetary impact that we would expect to see. And as I mentioned, the initial cost of the equipment is certainly very straightforward. We know we would need 33 snow gates to roll out a program citywide, and based on the per unit costs that we have seen, we expect that $198,000 would be the impact of purchasing the initial upfront cost of those 33 snow gates. I did put that in a separate box because I do want to clarify and make sure everyone understands that that is a one-time cost. The cost of that 5-year amortization and eventual replacement of that equipment is categorized as in the next segment that you'll see a part of our annual ongoing costs. So the annual plowing costs based on a typical winter, similar to what I would say similar to the 2010-11 year, we've estimated would be about $325,000. That would be for those costs that I mentioned for fuel, city labor and leased equipment, contracted labor and equipment, the installation of the snow gates, the maintenance and repairs on the snow gates, the removal in the spring, as well as that annual cost that money we would set aside to eventually replace those snow gates when they reach the end of their life. The snow pickup costs in school zones, again, this is based on very, very limited test data, and for that reason I've shown it as a range here of $0 to on the low end to a high end of $290,000 for the snow pickup. Winters like the past two, as I said, the cost clearly would be zero, but on the high end, in order to give you some perspective on what those costs might be, we based an estimate to pick up snow in all school zones throughout the entire city, and for one time throughout a winter. Now, a winter closer to normal, we would expect that we would incur some costs for snow pickup, but it really is, based on the data, the limited data we have, it's impossible to provide any sort of a confident estimate on how much that might be. So when we roll those two things together, the total annual budget impact, which again does not include the $198,000 on the upfront cost, would range from $325,000, which would be just those plowing costs in a year when we had no snow pickup, to a high of $615,000, which would include the increased plowing costs and as much as $290,000 in snow pickup costs in those school zones. So that concludes the financial portion of the analysis, and at this point I will turn it over to Mayor Huther to share his recommendation.
Well, I want to thank you for the opportunity. First of all, I want to say that the tests have certainly been worth the effort. We followed through with our plan. These tests were needed. They needed to be completed before the council, before the mayor, before the people could act in a responsible fashion. I think the council and the public have been incredibly patient. They've been responsible, and I think they've been prudent with their actions. When I was running for mayor, I learned very, very quickly that public support for at least testing these snow gates was incredibly strong. Now that I've served as your mayor for 3 years, I think I've got a pretty good pulse on the public. And I think that there's certainly a positive momentum in terms of these snow gates. Snow gates, I think, are truly a quality of life investment. I know that there are folks out there that truly believe that this is a want versus a need. And I respect that. But I also have heard, especially from those that are elderly, those that may have some physical challenges in their life, that they really need this. I also respect that. The financial risk that Tracy outlined, I think, is less than any of us expected. It's certainly less than what I expected when I pursued this, at least this testing, three years ago. I truly think that we can absorb these expenses without raising taxes, without raising fees, and without raising any front foot assessments. The operational risks, I mean, Galen did a tremendous job outlining those risks. And people of Sioux Falls, you need to understand there are risks associated with these snow gates. There are. They are not the perfect mechanism to removing all the snow from your driveway, from our streets, and ultimately from our city. There are risks, such as it is going to take us a bit more time if we do implement these snow gates as a city. But again, the delays were even less than what I had expected. I think you heard today it's potentially a 2 to 4 hour delay in terms of additional time that it'll take to utilize these snow gates. I have the utmost confidence in our public works team. And that includes the private contractors that work side by side with our public works team. They're extremely capable women and men. They know how to remove snow. They do it better than I think anybody in the country. And I think that, as Galen even mentioned, as we would utilize these snow gates more and more, their experience would become greater, and ultimately they become even more capable in operating them. Let me just say something, though, that is incredibly important. The number one thing that we will consider remains the safety of our people. Roads are hard enough to drive on when they're during the summer when they're clear. In the wintertime, safety is paramount. It is, and it will remain our highest priority. And I think that you'll see that some of the things that we've had to tackle with these snow gates have made that more of a challenge. But ultimately, again, let me take you to that upper bullet. Our public works team is incredibly capable. I think they'll figure it out. The people of our town, they're reasonable, and they will understand when exceptions need to be made. Galen and Mark, they did lay out the challenges these snow gates can create, especially in tough winters, especially in heavy snowfalls. The people of this town, they have common sense. They do. And I know that they will utilize that common sense in those cases where we do have heavy snowfalls or incredibly tough winters. So let me take you to my recommendation. It's pretty simple. I believe the City of Sioux Falls should implement snow gates citywide. Again, I believe the City of Sioux Falls should implement snow gates citywide. That's my own personal recommendation. I was elected by the people to serve, and as the mayor of this town, that is my personal recommendation. Now, one thing that the council needs to understand and the people of Sioux Falls need to understand, and something that I learned in a big way just over the last week or so, is that there are some other considerations. But let me take you to the strategy first. How would we do that as a town? First of all, first step is we budget for the additional costs in the 2014 plan. In fact, we're working on that now. Secondly, we would conduct informational meetings prior to the 2014 election to help educate the public. We'll explain to the public what we've learned over these 3 years of testing. If the vote is favorable on April 8th, 2014, we will implement snow gates for the 2014-2015 winter season. Folks, I promise you, we will have that order ticket ready to go. But we will have to wait for that election. If the vote is not favorable, we will not implement snow gates, and we will end further testing. However, I still think we will provide what many consider the best snow removal in the country right here in Sioux Falls. Now, I do have to talk about something, though, that I've learned over the last week. City Attorney Dave Fifley and that team, they work for all of us. They work for citizens, they work for the council, they work for the mayor, they work for city government. They play a vital role, and they have played a vital role in my personal recommendation, as well as the plan that was outlined right up above. Let's talk about that a little bit, and this is important for you folks to understand. First of all, Sioux Falls, you need to be aware that we did evaluate rolling out the snow gates immediately. That certainly would be my own personal preference. However, I've been advised by the legal counsel that we must be respectful of the initiative process, as well as understand that some Sioux Falls citizens will vote yes on April 8th, 2014, while others will vote no. According to our legal team, the City Council cannot take any action on the pending initiated measure that would alter or preempt the pending ballot issue. In case you're wondering whether the petitions can be withdrawn, they cannot. In case you are wondering whether the April 8th, 2014 vote can be canceled, it cannot. The horse is out of the barn, and we can't get him back in. Because of that, the voters will decide whether to move forward with snow gates or not on April 8th, 2014. So with that in mind, we will execute our plan as explained on the slide in front of you. I want to thank you for your time today. We now want to open it up for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and team.
You're welcome.
Questions from council. Councilor Staggers.
Yes. Which snow gates are we going to purchase? or want to purchase?
Well, I think you saw from the presentation, Councilor Staggers, the recommended snow gates, if we were to purchase them, would be the Hinky snow gates.
Okay. And then also, too, how many snow alerts do we have for over 6 inches of snow on average each year?
We had 1 in 10 and 1 this year.
So 1 out of...
We had 1 snow alert over 6 inches in 2010-11,
Okay,
and 1 again this year in February.
okay. This is so abnormal snow we've had. In the past, have there been a lot of snow alerts called for over 6 inches when we've had a lot of snow, or historically?
I guess I'm just going back
3 years.
the 3 years that we've done the testing, that I can let you know that we've had 2 of them that were 6 or more.
Okay.
Sorry.
I guess what I'm trying to find out, is this very common to have over 6 inches?
I would
Is it rare, or?
I would say it's more common for us to get less than 6 inches. Just going with the 3-year history, since we've had 1 in 2010 and we've had 1 now in 2013. Normally the snows come in anywhere from, what we've seen over the last 2 years is they come in at about 1.5 to 2. We put down lots of chemicals, but we don't have to issue snow alerts on them.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Aguilar.
Galen, you said that six-wheel graders are the type that should be used. Do we have access to enough through our own that we own? Because I didn't see any additional costs associated with having to purchase any additional graders.
We own, the City of Sioux Falls Street Division owns 5, and we lease 32. The plan is that we put snow gates on those motor graders, and what we could do is to run the gutter pan, and the contractors run the center lane.
Yeah, go ahead.
You talked about intersections, and will those houses that are on corner lots, will they receive more snow than in the past because of the use of snow gates?
Over the last 3 years, I've always mentioned, if you trap snow, it's got to go someplace. We have to find a spot to deposit it. And so if we are closing a gate through an intersection and we open that gate up when we clear the intersection, certainly we're going to get more discharge of snow at that particular point.
Thank you.
Councilor Karski.
Thank you. Probably Director Cotter, if I could. Mark, your comments were under the risks with the private contractor logistics. This has been a concern of mine. And you state that, these things can be worked out. And I'm sure it looks good on paper, and theoretically it can be worked out. But I know from talking to the contractors, they had some very big concerns about running their equipment with city equipment because of the logistics, timing, but more so because when you run equipment like that, you're used to and you can anticipate, excuse me, the other operators' moves just from working with them over a period of time.
That's right.
And the comment I heard was, we're going to have fisticuffs in the street, between city employees and contractors because of the difficulty that goes with that. So have we talked to the contractors to ask them if they would be willing to partner up in such a manner?
We have, in fact, that suggestion came from the contractors, because one of the things that contractors do is they'll line up private accounts, whether it's a multifamily business or housing or business or even something like the Empire Mall. And so on every snow event, they go out and actually plow those lots out. On ours, only until we declare a snow alert is when we actually source them in to help. One of the things that they've said is they'd prefer to not have the snow gate on their piece of equipment because it's just one of those devices that in certain situations they feel like they'd maybe have to take it off to do some of that private work. So to me, that was that balance on then what makes the most sense. The other thing too is plowing at the center line is less weight to pull than what the gutter line is, because you're not only, if you're plowing at the center line, you're only taking 14 feet of snow. If you're plowing at the gutter line, you're taking that first 14 feet because it gets discharged onto you, and then ultimately if you close the gate, now you're capturing all that snow, and that's a lot of weight. So the new 6-wheel drive machines in the past, prior to me, we had 4-wheel drive machines, there was chains put on equipment, they weren't heavy enough, and they really did get moved around a lot based on the weight of the snow. We've just had really good luck with the 6-wheel drive machines. We put our own tires on them, and we feel like truly that's our best route. And so it's just like any operation. You've got to find that balance. I personally think it is easier to plow the center line, and so I think that's a good trade-off. One of the things we're going to have to work out, and we're going to have to work this out as our city grows. We're 73 square miles today. We're growing, and so likely we're going to have some report-to-work locations that are in pods of the city, and those areas can concentrate for shift, whether it's the city or the contractors, cutting edges, fueling depots, things of that nature, so we can continue to capture opportunities with or without snow gates.
Okay. And one more question, if I may. Going back to the mayor's final comments, and I think this might be a question for the city attorney. Can we budget in 2014 for snow gates? Wouldn't that be influencing the election?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Councilor Karski, to preempt means that you're preventing someone from acting, or altering means changing. By budgeting, you are merely forecasting. It would still require council action as far as the purchase of the snow gates themselves. Based on that dollar amount, it would require a council action to approve those contracts, and it would also require the appropriation of that money. To merely have it in the budget is not taking an action that would preempt this election. Precedent has been set where we had Drake Springs Pool. In the capital plan, an amount was set. The vote came along and changed that dollar amount, so that would be very similar to what would be happening here.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Rolfing.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple questions. Galen, I guess first, if I could, I just have a note here. The Hinky and the Ironex, I see the difference. What's the difference in cost between the two? You know?
Actually, the Hinky was, we got a better price on the Hinkies this past year than we did on the Ironex. That works
out nice. Cul-de-sacs. Talked to someone today who said they, if I may, keep going.
Yeah, one more.
Who said they plow all the snow in a cul-de-sac into the middle, and then which makes it easier. And then they come in when it gets too big and take it away. Is that something we've ever done?
No, we don't. We consider that a line of sight issue. We don't want that snow in the street. We want it off the street. And so the method for us is to go in and pull that snow out of the center, take it down the street, and feather it along the street, and then come in and do a pass along that inside gutter line and clear out the driveways.
Now, when we were first elected, it seems like we had a report from you on the first report on the big year we had, where we had 65 inches of snow or something like that. And if I'm not mistaken, and I wish I would have gone back and got this, these numbers look significantly different. I'm thinking 40% difference in cost, half of it, yeah, it was half again as much, and the fuel savings or fuel costs were significantly different. The man hours were different. And the amount of time it was going to cost, it was going to be, instead of 24 hours, it's going to be like 48 hours to get the thing done. Okay. Are we mixing, is this because of the light years that we've had these last 2 years that these numbers are down? I think Tracy explained it very well. You know, we took a look at that first year, and then we take a look at the second year, and then we take a look at the third year. We're testing this. We're not putting any of our personal opinions or hypotheses in this. We're going by what that GPS unit is telling us that it takes us to go out and do this. And so over these 3 years,
this is what we've come up with.
So
over the
so these numbers are a compilation of 2 years that really we had no snow. And the 1 year we had snow that we could really get some good numbers off of. That's what you're telling me. Because I know that first year we were looking at, it was a little bit more than average. And those numbers scared the living daylights out of us. And now these last 2 years have had basically no snow when you got right down to it. We've had one run that we could basically use them on the last 2 years. And it was barely enough to use it on. And they barely had to slow down, is what you're telling us. And now we're looking at a 0 to 13% increase. And on that first year, we're looking like, I can remember 40%, sticks in my mind, 40 or 50% increase. And I think we're looking here, these are not good numbers then.
I believe the numbers today are better than the numbers after 1 year of testing. We had the very first year we had I think a little bit less than a normal year. I think it was 43 or 44 inches of snow that first year, but keep in mind we only had 2 snow gates operating. So that was part of the reason for doing a second year of testing and a third year of testing, to gather more data, and we've certainly done that. While the snows the past 2 winters have been lighter than normal, have been less than normal, that doesn't mean that the data that we've gathered is not valid. And we haven't simply taken an average of the 3 years either. We've looked at the higher rate of fuel consumption on that first year than what we experienced the second year and the third year. So we've factored that in, and the numbers that we've projected for a typical year are really based on that first year of snowfall, that 40-some inches of snow, when we look at the fuel consumption of an increase of 13%. And you know, it's a test, and nobody can stand up here and tell you with absolute certainty what it's going to cost. But I feel pretty good with the numbers we've got based on the data we have for the amount of time it will take, for the additional cost for our manpower, for our equipment, and for the fuel. I say the part that is really that I'm least confident in is that snow pickup and what costs we might encounter in those years when the snow does accumulate to the level that it's got to be removed from those school zones.
Okay, Councilor Rolfing, I'm going to circle back to you. I've
You
got
bet.
other questions. Okay. Councilor Jameson.
If I reviewed some of the notes, I saw that it was 33% cost increases, and so 13% is about half. It's really exciting news. That is encouraging, I guess, I wanted to follow up with that. The other part was, I'm not sure if I'm following it, testing again for this next coming winter. How would that be? Would you have the same number of areas? Would you shift those? Would you just keep the same to get?
We'll definitely identify 6 additional areas. I mean, we own the snow gates. We think it's important to continue to not only educate but use the equipment that we have. And so we would intend to, this fall, utilize those snow gates in 6 new test areas.
So would we wind up with areas of town that have never been tested? That
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
so there's enough space.
Oh, yes. We've only, in compilation, we've only tested about 20% of the neighborhood streets.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Jameson, you know, I was looking at Councilor or City Attorney Fifley as you were asking that question. I think it's, again, one of those things that I'm going to have to approach him, and he's going to have to act on behalf of you and I and the people and answer that question, because I'm sitting here going, now that it's on the ballot, I'm even kind of questioning, can we even continue those tests in the spirit of maybe influencing someone? I know what I'd like to do. I'd like to continue those tests.
Mr. Mayor.
I would, but
Mr. Fifley
City Attorney?
would answer. Mr. Fifley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The statute specifically says that the governing body may take no action. Since we've already purchased the snow gates and it's an administrative matter as far as utilizing the snow gates, you are not violating the statute. I think the electorate would expect you to continue testing to provide them more data for one more winter season.
Thank you, Mr. Fifley. Councilor Jameson. Hmm?
Yeah, I agree with that recommendation. But another one follow-up question, if I could, were the Was the administration able to utilize any of the information in the citizen survey in formulating your opinions or thoughts? There was a question in there about raising fees for the service or something, so.
Right, the survey included a question, I believe it was gauging support or lack thereof of the willingness of the citizens to pay more, higher fees if in order to accomplish the implementation of Snowgate citywide. We don't have a final report yet at this point. We've seen preliminary information on the survey data, but that really did not factor into the analysis whatsoever in terms of how this whole operational and financial analysis was conducted.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councilor Jameson, I guess with that question, even if the citizens would have said, yes, we'd be willing to pay more to implement snow gates, my recommendation is not to have the citizens pay more. Again, the numbers show that the increase in cost is not a large amount. So I believe that it's something that we can absorb as a community, and so that's why I made the recommendation that I did. And two, Councilor Rolfing, I need to come back to you just a little bit. When we did the first year's worth of testing, and I know that Galen came forward and gave some initial results, we talked about in business how 1 year's worth of data can really cause you some consternation later on if you do a full program rollout. And that's why, as a team, we said, let's continue to test this in hopes that we can refine our data. I will also let you know, Councilor Rolfing, that after that first year, I did approach Tracy Turback as well as Mark Cotter and Galen Huber, and I said, guys, the finance team and the public works team, they need to work hand in hand like brothers, analyzing not only the old data, but also analyzing the data that is yet to come. And I think that is one of the things that has happened in a big, big way. They've refined that analysis. They've worked as a team to look at all the data that is presented, and that's why you've got the numbers that you have today. With further testing, now that it's been approved by Councilor Jameson, as well as City Attorney Fifley, those numbers will just get better. It will. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Intiman.
I was also very encouraged by the test results, and I'm glad we do have them. But like any good accountant, there's always that, there's always that possibility that we're going to get more snow than we ever dreamed of, right? But I noticed that Tracy did provide us with, like any good accountant, did provide us with the appropriate disclaimer that we can't hold him accountable in case it does go over budget. So thanks for that, Tracy.
Thank you. Councilor Anderson.
I don't know if this will be for the city attorney or for Galen or Mark, but we are still in a testing phase here for snow gates, correct? And if we are, every year now we've expanded that testing by adding snow gates. Would we be able to do that again this year? And then that way, before the vote, we would have another expanded testing period this next winter.
Councilor Anderson, I can at least provide my personal account of that. We feel like 6 snow gates captures 6 test areas, and that's really adequate for us to be thrown across the city. But I will defer as well to David Fifley. We would not recommend purchasing any more until the vote takes place.
Mr. Fifley.
Again, Councilor Anderson, it's a matter of the governing body taking an action. If we're just using existing snow gates and just changing a test area, you're not taking any action as a governing body regarding the ballot question.
Thank you.
Okay, question from the chair, and then I'll circle back to the rest of the council. I have a question about low bidding process, and we've decided already that we're buying a certain brand. What happens to the rules about low bids and that sort of thing? Can we talk about that a little bit?
I would think that we have a competitive bid that we would be benching benchmarking that off of. And so when you do essentially write a spec to one manufacturer, you have to make sure that you're doing your due diligence. And so Tracy's team, along with Scott Russ, we'd work through those issues. That gets done essentially just like if you buy controls for the water plant. Once you get one brand in there, you still want to make sure you can achieve competitive pricing, but essentially you do determine the reasons why that piece of equipment or that functionality is the right way to go, and you've got to work to get the most competitive bid. So our estimate on that was $6,000 per gate.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, circling back, Councilor Rolfing.
Yes, Galen again. Have we done any, gotten any numbers during this whole process from other cities who have had more experience with this than we have on what their cost is?
You know, we've heard, certainly I've been in contact with North Dakota, but let me caution you with that. Okay. We did a test on chemicals because we heard that certain chemicals, the magnesium chlorides, work very well in Minnesota. We brought those magnesium chlorides into Sioux Falls, and they didn't work at all. They made our roads slippery, and it was worse than if we wouldn't have put any chemicals on it. So I caution about taking a look at anybody else's test results, because nobody pushes snow alike, and we push snow a lot different than everybody else does, and so I caution on that. We used it basically as a guide to take a look at what we're coming up with, but never did we ever incorporate any of their data into our system.
No, I didn't want to incorporate it. I just want to look at it as a comparison.
You know, certainly we ask them if they've used different types of snow gates out there. Some have used the ironics. Most of them have used the Hinkies.
Okay.
Okay, Councilor Jameson.
Thank you, Galen. Sorry, don't run. Galen. Question for you, if I could. Councilor Karski brought up a question last time we had a healthy discussion on snow gates regarding in essence, a disaster, say a blizzard, you know, a major blizzard hitting the city. Have you considered and thought about and estimated what would happen if we had such a blizzard that there was no place to put any snow and you had these snow gates and you're operating them? What would be the impact? Have you considered that step?
One thing about it is I have team on site, and we are working the snow event as it's coming in. The initial response to the event would be once we call the snow alert. Basically, it's after the major portion of the snow has come through, because I don't want to plow the city twice. If I plow it before it's completely done or almost done, I'm going to have to go back to those original areas. So we'll know whether or not this is a pushable snow with snow gates or not. Certainly the snowstorm, the Christmas Eve snowstorm, we had 19 inches. It's not going to be even capable of doing it. And so we'll be able to judge the impact of it. Sometimes we get information where you're only going to get 2 inches and it snows for 3 days straight, and after that 3 days it ends up being, you know, like 10 inches or something like that. We would run the snow gates until it comes to a point where we physically don't believe that they are doing anything at all for us as far as keeping snow out of the driveway. It's making the road conditions even worse than what it is. One of the things that we talked about is when we're pushing snow, and there's a lot of been talk about speed. If we go too fast with snow gates, we are actually losing the snow underneath that we need to be able to drive in order to capture that snow and leave it in underneath. With speed, sometimes the mow board is moving on us, or with the crown of the road, the crown of the road, it escapes from us, and we just have to do our due diligence and make sure that we're taking the snow off, and we don't want to go back and plow again. Sorry, I got German ancestry, and I can't talk without moving my hands.
Right there with you, Galen. It's okay. Is that okay, Councilor Jameson? Okay, Councilor Staggers.
Yes. Since we're going to continue experimenting with the snow gates this coming winter, are we going to eliminate the iron necks snow gates and just use Hinky?
I think we'll still go out there and use them this next year yet. The plan would be to, if the vote is favorable, that we would go to one snow gate, because I don't want to have 2 different sets of parts, 2 different sets of hoses, 2 different sets of ways to operate out there. I want to have one that I want to deal with. But we'll still continue to use the ironics out there. I still think it's a valuable information for us to catch on how they operate. I have a lot of operators out there that haven't run a snow gate, and I'm going to give those guys an opportunity to run snow gates the winter of 13-14.
I guess my concern is that since we've determined that the ironics is not as good as the Hinky, that's going to affect the results.
I think for me, what we're looking at is, we got the data here. We've taken a look at the data, and I don't know if the ironics is going to throw the data off that much. Certainly, what you're going to see is the quality more so than the time and fuel consumption. I think the quality of the ironics, because it lets more snow in the driveway. There's more snow that's left there than what the Hinky is. So I don't know if it'd throw the data or not. I guess I can't answer that question. Good for you, Counselor.
So how many ironics and how many Hinky would we have?
Right now I have 6. I have 2 ironics and 4 Hinkies.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Jameson.
Galen, you and I spent quite some time in the last winter storm, or whatever you might call it, the last snowstorm, snow event. And one thing that dawned on me was watching these operators was they go past a driveway that has a 2-stall garage with a 2-wide entryway into their house, and then you go by houses with just 1. And I live in an area where there's 3. Would you recommend and propose that the service be the same for all driveways, no matter if it's 3-stall or 1?
Well,
or would there be more of a level of service just to provide an entrance access or exit access per household?
And I think that's a really good question. I actually, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, has gone to the way they have it set up. They provide an adequate clearance on the driveway. They don't say that they're going to clear the entire driveway. If you have a 3-car garage and you have 3-car widths coming out, they don't guarantee that they're going to clear all 3 widths. They will provide an access for your vehicles to go in and go out. That's one example. And you were talking about, too, have we looked at other situations like that? It may be that we are able to take all the snow out of the driveways, or it may mean, like especially some of these 3-car garages where we actually pulled through two 3-car garages at once. I had snow coming around everywhere. We may have to dump some in the middle between those 2, but still provide access for them to get out with that one with their vehicles.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I've heard more from some folks than others. It was a very good conversation. Lots of great information. We appreciate the entire team. Appreciate the mayor stopping by. Thanks for being here. Any other items for the council informational meeting? All right, I'm going to give it, Councilor Karski, go ahead.
We do have a fiscal committee.
Yes, I was going to announce that, yes.
Immediately after this, and Mr. O'Toole, it's been kind of a busy legislative session out in Pierre, and we were able to get our bills passed favorably to include the city employees. So if you want to hear how our new pension system is going to work, stick around. It's going to be some interesting information, and that is our only agenda item.
Okay. So the fiscal committee will meet in 10 minutes. We're going to adjourn this meeting and then give a 10-minute break to allow time for staff to make the switches that they do electronically. So this meeting is adjourned.